recruiting. A difficult time for the coaching staffs to deal with postseason play, recruiting, that juggling act coming out of the big rivalry game against Florida State, and then having to really, really tighten up the recruiting. And certainly a time of year in which we hear the term flip quite a bit.
Yep.
And in Florida's case, in a good way this week.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Dan Mullen actually joked last week while he was, talking to us at Florida State, and even this last week when he was doing his kickoff to the press conference with Bronco Mendenhall on Wednesday, that he doesn't sleep right now because he's busily juggling, preparing for a bowl and having all these in-home visits, but his hard work is paying off. This week, he was able to flip 2 big targets for them. On Thursday, he flipped Josh Braun, which is a really big offensive lineman from Georgia. Florida really benefited from Pittman leaving the Georgia staff to become a head coach in Arkansas. And because of that, Florida kind of pounced. A lot of people will say, well, they were just lucky, but you can't be lucky if you stop recruiting these athletes. Florida did a great job of staying on top of Josh Braun and his family and keeping recruiting him despite that he was committed to the Bulldogs. There's a reason why, as soon as the Pittman news kind of happened, that Braun put Florida back in his radar, because they were always on his radar because they never stopped recruiting him. So Dan Mullen and his staff, John Hevesy, did a very, very good job by making sure they were always in his ear. They also did a good job by showing, the Braun family that they're able to develop linemen like Ethan White. Ethan White came on campus in January weighing almost 400 pounds. He lost 60 pounds through his work ethic with Nick Savage. And then he was starting his first game against Vanderbilt this year because of just injuries and Chris Bleish entering the transfer portal. So the Braun family was able to see that transition from coming in as a true freshman and then starting as a true freshman. And then they also flipped MORDECAI MCDANIEL from Tennessee. That's a good player from, a good DB. And it's an area where Florida really needs to reinforce. Dan Mullen has been dealt with some bad luck since his arrival here at Florida. There were some off the field issues that resulted in a few of the players leaving campus, but they also had some issues with some medical issues. Like Randy Russell was during his first class coming in, his transition class, and he was giving a medical hardship waiver because he has a heart condition and he couldn't play. So they've had some issues getting numbers at DB. So this is a really good thing for Florida to have right now, is adding that depth at DB. So they've been doing a really good job, and it kind of follows the trend with the staff. The last 3 years, they've really closed out strong, and they're hoping to close out strong this weekend too. They're going to have a few guys on campus, including Alabama commit defensive tackle Tim Smith, which is still such a huge target for them. He's going to be on campus for an official visit this weekend. And, they just got a commitment last week from 4-star defensive tackle Jalen Lee. And when you look at the class balance, when you kind of look at the scholarships, that's a position where the two former staffs didn't do a really good job recruiting in those positions, because if you look at it, after you take the seniors out of consideration, there are 4 guys that are either redshirt juniors or seniors next year. And then there's a gap until Jalen Humphreys, which is a redshirt freshman. That's something that they're trying to fix, and they need to do that either with grad transfers going into the transfer portal, or also, just build that depth now. And that's what they're doing in this class. They're really focused on the interior defensive line, because we saw what happens when they're hit by injuries. This year, Dan Mullen at one point only had 61 scholarship players available because of injuries. So they're really trying to work those numbers, work their counters to make sure they have more bodies coming in next year. So I expect them to maybe sign between 28 or 29 guys.
We've got Jackie Franchuli on the line from Gators territory. Please join her on the Rivals Network right there as Florida wraps up a recruiting class on the early signing day, of course, coming up this Wednesday, December 18th.